Welcome to the SecurityDNA podcast powered by SecurityInfoWatch. This is your front line for bold insights and real intelligence that cuts through the noise and gets straight to what matters most. I'm Samantha Schober, Assistant Editor of SecurityInfoWatch and the producer of today's episode. At SecurityInfoWatch, we deliver sharp, real-time insights into the biggest challenges facing security and risk professionals today. From emerging threats to game-changing technologies, we go beyond the headlines to provide expert analysis, real-world strategies, and critical risk intelligence, giving you the knowledge you need to stay ahead in this rapidly evolving landscape. My colleague, Steve Lasky, a seasoned veteran of the security industry with over 35 years of experience, will join us today. As the editorial director for the security group at Endeavor Business Media, Steve brings deep expertise and a unique perspective to every conversation. Today, Steve welcomes Max Henderson, Global Head of Digital Forensics and Incident Response for Kroll, based in Tampa. So let's get started. Max leverages more than 10 years of experience in digital forensics and incident response to drive Kroll's cyber responses growth and enable leading organizations to address ransomware, email compromises, insider threats, zero-day vulnerabilities, and other security threats. Before joining Kroll, Max was the founding leader of the Digital Forensics and Incident Response, or DFIR, program at Ponderance, where he spent 11 years. Under his leadership, the Ponderance DFIR program was recognized as a finalist at the Zywave Awards for the Global Incident Response Team of the Year, annually from 2022 to 2025, and as a finalist for the Global Incident Response Team of the Year by the Intelligent Insurer in 2025. To date, Max has directly led over 1,000 incident response cases. Max's casework has commonly been featured on news headlines, including a healthcare matter featured on CBS's 60 Minutes, Ransomware. Max has also served as an expert witness for the Fortune 100 and has served as a multi-time expert contributor to CNN on cybersecurity. Max is a frequent global speaker on cybersecurity, having made multiple guest appearances at Yale University, and served as a lead moderator for the Ransomware Advisory Group at Net Diligence on numerous occasions. Max has previously been the headline speaker nationally to all members for the Federal Bureau of Investigation's InfraGard organization, and has presented alongside the National Crime Agency in London and the United States Secret Service at various venues, including Citi Field in New York. And with that, let's turn it over to Steve.
All right, Matt. Appreciate that. Impressive CV, and welcome to SecurityDNA. Today, we're going to get into a conversation that every organization's cybersecurity and risk leadership team needs to hear, because the next big strike may not have made headlines, but while the security world has been fixated on the phishing and credential theft actor Scattered Spider, we want to shift our focus today to what might come next, and that threat may be posed by the ransomware extortion group called CLOP. So joining us is Max Henderson, as Sam alluded to, who believes CLOP could be behind the next widespread campaign, one that may leverage file transfer vulnerabilities to hit hundreds of organizations across industries simultaneously. So today we're going to unpack what CLOP is, how their tactics are evolving, and why focusing on a single actor is risky, what sectors are most exposed, and what preventative action leaders should take presently and into the future. We're also going to explore broader trends in threat group behavior, including strategic timing, more aggressive extortion, and increasingly personalized attack vectors. So whether you're a CSO, a director of security, a risk manager, an ops leader, I think you're going to find something that is going to appeal to you in this episode. So Max, welcome, and let's dive in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on today.
Oh, our pleasure. So the first question, around late September 2025, threat intelligence teams, including Google Threat Intelligence Group and Mandiant, started tracking a large-scale extortion campaign. The campaign was built around the claim that data had been exfiltrated from Oracle EBS systems. So to begin, can you briefly walk through the CLOP evolution from an early ransomware encryptor to today's large-scale extortion model?
Yeah, I think as you look at all these different groups and really the ways that they're evolving to extort and the ways that they're getting creative, you really range from certain groups that take time on each victim to really understand the environment, versus groups that take a scaled approach, right? More of a smash and grab type approach, and that's where CLOP fits in. They spend a lot of time researching, and that's where you look over the past few years. There's often a time gap in between each CLOP compromise, and what you see is after that time gap, CLOP will target a very specific suite or rather application for their extortion. And so you look back at the Move It application that was hit, and you fast forward to here recently to the Oracle EBS suite. And so what happens is over time, CLOP will spend months and months targeting different solutions. They find a vulnerability. They probe the internet to find what their surface area is for that application, in this case, Oracle EBS. And they say, here's our few hundred targets. With Move It, it was over 2,000. With the Oracle suite, it looks to be in the hundreds by early estimates. And really what they do is within that target list, they en masse exploit all of the Oracle EBSs that are on the internet, and they actually exfiltrate data from that. What we've seen is they then take this massive compilation of data and they sort of sort through on the high priority targets. And so you look through the way that they begin to reveal their victims is after they've attempted to contact via email. In some situations, they contact via phone, and through that, they start to list out and try to extort those high-profile ones. So that's where you see, I believe, in the early days, they made claims that Harvard was among the ones targeted. There's very large organizations, and then as those begin to get released for those who didn't pay up per se, you start to see more and more, even through today, seeing more and more victims get listed on their website.
That's a great overview. I appreciate that. You described CLOP as having the capability to hit 200 to 300 organizations at once via file transfer application weaknesses. What is it about those applications that make them such attractive targets?
I think step one is just being on the internet itself. Step two for them is you look historically, they have looked at various file transfer applications. In this case, the Oracle EBS suite commonly houses items from billing, accounting, project files, all sorts of things, contracts that could contain notification obligations for victim entities to have to notify either individuals or clients. And that's where you see the extortion start to focus, is claiming that specific key clients or key vendors or key partners, or even in the healthcare side, key patients. That's where you start to see them target. So getting something that has data that's of value, whether it's from a moral perspective or a financial perspective, that's where they find their leverage for extortion.
Right. Max, we see that, a lot of organizations either lack focus or they focus on just particulars, the high hanging fruit or the low hanging fruit, like phishing or credentials theft. Why is that a mistake when organizations fixate on only one threat actor, say like a scattered spider, and what does that mean in practice for enterprise defense?
Yeah, I think certainly scattered spider grabs the headlines, and with it comes the need for defense around social engineering. But I think
Right.
too is a lot of times whatever's capturing the headlines doesn't necessarily encompass the holistic picture of defense in depth. And so a lot of times when you hyper focus on a certain threat, you lose that focus of the basics, right? And so that can be anything from just having multi-factor on your perimeter to having immutable backups, to having segmentation of the network. But again, even the holistic picture makes you vulnerable to edge cases like CLOP, where there are more unique defenses that necessarily aren't mitigated by that multi-factor. So yes, maintaining that holistic picture, but also keeping a keen eye on, the emerging threats and kind of different ways that you have to defend yourself.
When we look at the sectors that are being affected now by some of these blatant and very overt attacks, we're seeing healthcare, we're seeing the financial sector. In your view, what types of industries and organizations profile most at risk for CLOP style campaigns, and why?
Yeah, I think cloud's unique, especially this one. You look at Oracle EBS, and Oracle EBS is actually more of a legacy product. They've moved, Oracle as a company has moved, I believe it's Oracle Fusion in the cloud, sort of similar from going from Microsoft Exchange to Microsoft 365. And so you're left with, in this situation, a lot of legacy type equipment, and that profiles into two types of organizations in my mind. Number one, that is very large enterprises that have a very long life cycle to migrate fully from these older products that, and I think 2012 is when that really started to hit the market. And so you're left in situations where this type of equipment is still in use and is very difficult to migrate off of. So that's where, in my mind, you start to see a lot of the larger enterprises. But also on the flip side, there's a cost to migrating, there's a cost to upgrading in different ways to Oracle Fusion. And so that would be also on the lesser end of companies who budget-wise haven't necessarily carved out that full budget to move over to the cloud-based, again, sort of like a Microsoft 365.
Very good. When organizations and their risk and ops personnel are talking about pre-attack preparation for something like CLOPS's MO, what are the top three preventative measures a security leader should ensure are in place, in your opinion?
I think for cloud specific, and legal counsel is going to be the one who praises this
Right.
one is old data. You get into some of these applications, these especially historically for CLOP, you look at the file storage and you find files in there that are 15, 20 years old. And so just from a hygiene perspective, there could have been a very reduced surface area of exposure just from a routine purging of data that's no longer necessary to maintain or is no longer in use. So certainly being very, very hyper aware of the age, the amount, and the type of data that's being stored on these. And then again, getting more specific with CLOP, you look at a lot of these being on the internet as applications, and then you start talking about preventative measures such as a web application firewall. So start to finish, the very start of the attack would typically pass through a web application firewall. There'd be an opportunity there for it to be stopped. After it would get through that, you would then have the endpoint detection on the actual server. That could stop exploitation in different ways. And then, of course, if those two fail, you then have the hygiene as that third option there, in terms of what data can they actually get. So that's what we talk about defense in depth. We have products, we have implementations, but we also have policy there.
And when we're looking at CLOPS, which is known for their mass compromise and strategic timing, going after organizations during the holidays, on the weekends when they're most vulnerable, and exfiltrating over encryption. What signs or indicators should organizations and their security personnel monitor to detect an intrusion in progress before the extortion demands really hit?
Yeah, I think there's a few different key areas there. And you talk about holidays, the other area too within that is you look at school districts where
Yeah,
they may go offline for the summer and then they
right.
turn back on and immediately they're turning on and it's a vulnerable piece of software now that they have to update. So just holistically on that piece, updating, being aware of vulnerabilities that get released. But in this situation, it is a 0 day, right? That means that you have 0 days to react by the time that you're aware somebody is targeting it. That means that the vendor that actually owns that software had 0 days to become aware of that as well. And so when it comes to that piece, it is having those two key measures, having that web app firewall, also having endpoint detection on there, but also monitoring it, having visibility into it. Yes, CLOP in this situation mainly targeted Oracle, but they very easily could have pivoted into the rest of these networks. They could have pivoted into systems that are very proximate to that. And so the key there would be monitoring that endpoint detection and then being able to place context to containment and eradication before that would scale into a larger type of attack.
Well, playing off that explanation, when those attacks turn from simple penetration or infiltration to downright extortion, organizations are going to go straight into crisis mode. So when you're dealing with incident responses, steps are going to be different when you're dealing with mass mass scale supply chain incidents or file transfer vulnerability exploitations versus a more conventional ransomware event. So kind of talk us through that a little bit.
I think in any organization that's responding based on the facts at the time, I think the hardest part to contain isn't the incident itself, it's the adrenaline rush that you get.
Right.
And I think that a lot of both individuals and organizations have a knee-jerk reaction to turn a computer off, to shut things down. But it's very important to take a step back for a moment and apply context to what you're analyzing. And so you look at from a supply chain perspective, if you shut off the one computer that you had the alert on, but that supply chain has reached to 1,000 computers, you may now tip off the threat actor that you're on to that you're responding to them, and you may trigger either a premature action on their end, or you may trigger them to go dormant and wait a bit until you start to ease your grip a little. So applying that context, applying what the implications must be of the situation that you're responding to, and then basing it off the facts at the time to kind of drive that back based on logic, to then correlate all that into containment and eradication of the incident. Takes practice, but it is at the end of the day, there are fundamental basics that you want to utilize to contain these.
Again, organizations are much like people. They're with the mindset of it can't happen here or it's not going to happen to me, and getting that risk buy-in and having the C-level folks really understand the budget perspective and the reasons why these things are taking approaches to clean cyber environments is important. If I'm a security director or a CSO and I'm trying to present to senior leadership a business case for investing now in resilience mechanisms aimed at high impact threats like CLOP, what is the tact I need to take? Because again, sometimes things like this fall on deaf ears until you're actually hit with an attack.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of statistics out there, and it's hard to kind of relate and quantify those in certain ways within your own organization. But I think what I always really get through with is business interruption, understanding and really conveying what the impact might be from an operations perspective, whether that's taking in new orders, whether that's delivering services, whether that's producing, manufacturing, shipping. There's all these different key areas that with a very minor act of intrusion, you might have to take drastic measures that would impact operations. And then you start to quantify that day over day. And then even in situations where you may think it's 5 to 7 days to recover, yet now your vendor, now your partner saying they need an attestation, and now that timeline doubles or triples. And so just understanding from an operational perspective what that financial impact might be based on the amount of days that you would be out for your organization and based on the department that it impacts, you can really start to quickly understand how just minor investments in defense in depth really can help mitigate or even minimize some of that downtime in the event that it actually happens.
Adapting and responses are huge issues here. So you've been doing this a long time. You've had a lot of experience in all sorts of attacks and challenges. What are you seeing as the broader threat group activity expands as far as significant changes you're seeing on how groups like CLOP operate, dealing with tactics, timing, personalization, things like that security leaders really now must adapt to quickly and be able to respond to immediately?
Yeah, first I just talk about the actual activity and the time of the year that we're in now, where Q4, Q1 is that hotbed of activity. And I always joke with winter weather arriving in Eastern Europe's the best indicator of an uptick in criminal activity. When a snowstorm hits, there's not much else to do but sit on your computer inside. And so with that, I think that the harassment techniques have evolved. I think through harassment, they're able to get extortion in unique ways, threatening to call clients, threatening to call patients, threatening to call spouses, sending things in the mail to the CEO of the victim, but also maximizing pressure and speeding up timelines to notify. They're able to extort in different ways, whereas a couple of years ago it used to just be a note that gets left. So don't underestimate the pressure. Don't underestimate the threats. The reach, their ability to comb through the data and recognize the phone numbers and the key clients or personnel to call, because that's how they're weaponizing it and speeding up the extortion part.
Well, being that we're heading into winter, we just got our first snow here in North Georgia yesterday. So, when you're looking at Eastern Europe, it's going to be a cold, dark winter. And for organizations that really haven't been touched yet or publicly compromised by CLOP or similar type challenges, what proactive steps should they be taking within the next 90 days to reduce their attack surface and improve detection?
Yeah, I think within a 90-day timeline, it's tough to roll out net new implementations. I think doubling down on what you have, both from a deployment perspective, from a verbosity perspective, you really want to look at what's enabled from a logging piece. You want to look at retention of that, but also, what is actually being audited within, whether that's just adding in additional fields or sending it to a central repository that's already in existence, and then just making sure that you're continuously updating your password policies, and rotating that. You start to see a lot of unique extortion stem out of that as it relates to kind of third-party access in the cloud, logging into different pieces. So staying resilient on what you have, doubling down on what you have, and then trust but verifying what you have.
Do you see specifically the CLOP organization, or ones that are going to morph and branch off from that, really becoming more prevalent? Or do you think we're starting to get a little bit of control over the situation, or are we just still overwhelmed?
Unfortunately, I think that it's splintering more and more to where different threat groups are evolving into different ways to extort and have reach. I think, again, 5 years ago, you really had to have an advanced encryptor, right, to actually encrypt files and render them inaccessible. And that bar to entry has lowered. And so now, just with data theft and extorting that way, it's a much more simplistic approach for a threat actor to number one, perform, but also to scale with. To scale with the amount of victim organizations that CLOP does, you could not really do that with a ransomware encryptor unless you look back to something that's like a worm, like the WannaCry days,
Right.
10 years ago almost now. But I think that through the splintering of that, and even look at AI as lowering that bar, I think that's going to get more and more frequent, that we start to see more diverse types of attacks.
I think that's a great place to end for today. And I think you and I both agree, Max, that the CLOP campaign targeting the Oracle EBS is a wake-up call for CSOs. And the threat landscape is shifting from endpoints and file servers to the heart of enterprise business applications. So if you run a large system like EBS or equivalents like ERP and CRM platforms, you're not going to be able to treat them like peripherals anymore and ignore them. They're your crown jewels, and they've got to be protected. And right now, they're prime targets for extortion. So, Max, I appreciate you enlightening us and give us some tips here. And Sam, I'm going to toss this back to you to close us out.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Max, for this compelling deep dive into the cyber threats we face today. And thank you for tuning in. This podcast is your go-to source for staying ahead in the security industry. It offers sharp insights, real-time trends, and straight talk for industry professionals. It's built to keep you informed and empowered wherever you are. Stay connected, stay sharp, and maintain security at the forefront. To access our podcast lineup, go to podbean.com and search for SecurityDNA. You can also find our podcast in our Security Frontline, Integrator Newswire, and Security Week e-newsletters. Of course, we'd love to receive feedback from you, our listeners, about topics that interest you. If you have a suggestion, email Steve at slasky, that's SLASKY, at SecurityInfoWatch.com. This episode of the SecurityDNA podcast was recorded and produced by Samantha Schober, that's me, Assistant Editor for SecurityInfoWatch, an Endeavor B2B brand. For Steve Lasky, Max Henderson, and everyone at SecurityInfoWatch, thanks for listening, and keep an ear open for our next podcast.